I became the pet of an alien empress. But she doesn't know I understand her language. The first thing that hit me wasn't the pain, it was the smell. Sweet like flowers, but with a sharp metal edge that made my nose burn. Like someone had mixed perfume with blood and left it sitting in the sun. I woke up slowly, my head spinning like I'd been hit by a freight train. My mouth tasted like copper pennies and my limbs felt heavy, like they were made of lead instead of flesh and bone. When I tried to open my eyes, the world swam in and out of focus, colors bleeding together like watercolors in the rain. Then I saw the bars. Not just any bars, these were something else entirely. They curved up and over me in a perfect dome, made of some kind of metal that seemed to move and shift when I wasn't looking directly at it. Energy hummed through them, creating a low buzzing sound that vibrated in my chest and made my teeth ache. Every few seconds, waves of light would ripple across the surface like stones dropped in a still pond. I was in a cage. An actual honest-to-God cage. The floor beneath me was covered in the softest cushions I'd ever felt. They were thick and plush, covered in fabric that seemed to shimmer when the light hit it just right. Intricate patterns were sewn into each one, swirling designs that hurt to look at too long, like they were moving even when they weren't. I pushed myself up on shaking arms, my body protesting every movement. Everything ached, but nothing seemed broken. That was something, at least. My clothes were gone, replaced by some kind of loose-fitting garment that felt like silk against my skin. It was clean and soft, but it wasn't mine, and that fact made my stomach turn. Where was I? How did I get here? Then the memories came flooding back like a dam bursting. I'd been on my ship, the Mariner, my home for the past 5 years. She wasn't much to look at, old and patched up in a dozen places, but she was fast and she was mine. I'd been running a simple job, nothing fancy, just moving some cargo from one end of the galaxy to the other. Legal cargo, mostly. The kind of work that paid the bills and kept me flying. I'd been 3 days out from my destination when everything went wrong. The attack came without warning. 1 second I was alone in the black void of space. The next my proximity alarms were screaming like banshees. A massive ship had just appeared out of nowhere, decloaking right on top of me like a predator pouncing on prey. I'd recognized the design immediately. Zari, the warrior race that controlled half the known galaxy. Their ships were works of art and instruments of death rolled into one, all sleek curves and hidden weapons. This one was bigger than anything I'd ever seen, easily 10 times the size of my little transport. They'd hit me with an electromagnetic pulse before I could even think about running. Every system on my ship died at once: lights, engines, life support, everything. I'd fumbled for the emergency transmitter, desperate to send out a distress call, but my hands were shaking too badly to work the controls. Then they'd boarded. I remembered the sound of my airlock being torn open like tissue paper, the stamp of heavy boots on metal, voices shouting in a language that sounded like music and thunder mixed together. I'd tried to hide, but there was nowhere to go on a ship as small as mine. The last thing I remembered was a sharp pain in my neck, like a wasp sting, and then darkness swallowing me whole. Now I was here, wherever here was. The sound of footsteps made me look up. They were slow and measured, like someone who had all the time in the world and knew it. The door to my prison, because that's what this was, a prison, slid open without a sound. She walked in like she owned the universe, and maybe she did. She was tall, taller than any human woman I'd ever met, with a grace that spoke of power and breeding. Her skin was a deep emerald green that seemed to glow from within, smooth and flawless as polished jade. Long black hair fell down her back in waves, so dark it seemed to absorb light. Threads of silver were woven through it, catching the light and making her look like she wore stars in her hair. But it was her eyes that stopped my breath. They were gold. Not brown with gold flecks, not hazel that looked gold in the right light, but pure molten gold like coins fresh from the mint. They were sharp and intelligent, missing nothing as they swept over me. There was amusement in them, and something else, the look a collector might give a rare butterfly they'd just pinned to a board. She wore a gown that seemed to be made of liquid shadow. It clung to her body like a second skin, so dark it was almost black, but when she moved, I could see through it in places. Constellations were embroidered across the fabric in silver thread star patterns I didn't recognize from any human chart. Jewelry adorned her throat and wrists, subtle but expensive. Each piece probably cost more than my ship. Everything about her screamed royalty. The way she held herself, the way she moved, the way the air itself seemed to bend around her. This wasn't just some Zari noble. This was their ruler, their Empress, and I was her newest toy. She stepped closer to my cage, her movements liquid and predatory. When she smiled, it was the kind of smile a cat might give a mouse before the killing. Bite. Oh, what an amusing little thing, she said in perfect Zari. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. She didn't know I could understand her. Zari was a complex language, all tonal shifts and subtle meanings. Most humans couldn't even pronounce it properly, let alone speak it fluently, but I could. I'd learned it years ago from an ex-girlfriend who was obsessed with alien cultures. Sarah had spent hours drilling me on verb conjugations and pronunciation until I could speak it like a native. I'd thought it was a waste of time back then. Now, it might be the only thing keeping me alive. So I kept my face blank and my mouth shut. Let her think I was just another ignorant human who couldn't tell the difference between a greeting and a death threat. Her smile widened, showing teeth that were too white and too sharp. A fascinating specimen, she continued, circling my cage like a shark. Humans are usually so ordinary, but you. Her golden eyes traced over my face, my shoulders, my body like she was memorizing every detail. You are quite well formed. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from reacting. The way she was looking at me made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to stay still. Animals in cages didn't understand when they were being evaluated. They just sat there and took it. She crouched down beside the bars, bringing her face level with mine. Up close, I could see that her skin wasn't just green, it had an iridescent quality, like oil on water. Her fingers, long and elegant with nails painted the color of dried blood, reached through the bars to touch my jaw. Her skin was cool against mine, like marble that had been left in shadow. She traced the line of my jaw with one finger, then down my throat, her touch light but possessive. I fought every instinct I had to pull away. You understand nothing, do you? She mused, more to herself than to me. So helpless, so obedient. I met her gaze without flinching. Inside, I was cataloging every word, every expression, every micro-emotion that flickered across her face. But on the outside, I was just a confused animal staring at its captor. That seemed to please her. She withdrew her hand and stood, her gown flowing around her like liquid night. The chamber I was in was massive, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows high above. Black pillars supported arched doorways that led to rooms I couldn't see. The walls were draped in rich purple fabric that shimmered when the light hit it. Behind what I assumed was her throne, a tall chair carved from dark metal and cushioned in the same purple silk. A wall of glass looked out over a city that defied description. Towering spires stretched up toward a star-filled sky, connected by bridges of light that pulsed with traffic. The buildings themselves seemed to be alive, their surfaces shifting and changing color like the skin of some massive creature. It was beautiful and alien and completely unlike anything humanity had ever built. She settled onto her throne with the ease of someone born to rule, ranging her gown around her with practiced grace. With a gesture of her hand, a small alien scurried forward from the shadows. This one was nothing like the Empress. It was barely half my height, with thin arms that looked too long for its body and skin the color of old pewter. Its eyes were large and dark, taking up most of its face, and it moved with the quick, nervous energy of prey animals. Ensure he is well fed, the Empress said in Zari, her voice carrying the easy authority of someone used to being obeyed. Clean him, groom him properly. She tilted her head, considering me like I was a piece of furniture she was trying to decide where to place. I want him presentable. The smaller alien bobbed its head rapidly and began tapping at a panel of light that appeared in the air before it. I wanted to punch something. She was talking about me like I was a pet, like I was some kind of animal she'd picked up at a market, but I kept my face blank and my breathing steady. Let her think I didn't understand. Let her think I was just another dumb human who couldn't comprehend what was happening to me. She leaned back in her throne, resting her cheek against her palm as she studied me. I wonder, she murmured, her voice soft and contemplative, how long it will take to tame you completely. I stared back at her, letting my eyes go slightly unfocused, like I was looking through her instead of at her. Inside, rage was building in my chest like a fire, but I kept it locked down tight. She thought I was ignorant. She thought I was weak. She thought I was broken. Let her think that. Because if she was the ruler of this place, then her words and her secrets would fall around me like rain. And when the time came when I found my chance, I wouldn't be the one locked in a cage. The Empress, I quickly learned. Loved the sound of her own voice. At first, I thought it was simple arrogance. She was the ruler of what appeared to be a galactic empire, after all. Maybe she just enjoyed hearing herself talk, reveling in the power that came with knowing everyone had to listen to her whether they wanted to or not. But as the days passed, and I played my role as her silent, obedient pet, I began to understand the truth. She didn't see me as a person at all. To her, I was no different from a piece of furniture or a decorative plant. I was an ornament, something exotic and amusing to have around, but not something that could actually understand what she was saying. And because of that, she spoke freely around me. My days fell into a routine that was both luxurious and humiliating. I would wake on my pile of silk cushions to find fresh food and water waiting for me, actual food, not the nutrient paste I'd lived on during my transport runs. Fruits I'd never seen before, their skins ranging from deep purple to brilliant orange, sweet and juicy and probably worth more than most people made in a year. Meat that had been cooked to perfection and seasoned with spices that made my mouth water. After eating the small gray alien, I'd started thinking of him as servant, since I never heard anyone use his actual name, would enter my cage to bathe and dress me. It was mortifying, being treated like a child who couldn't take care of himself, but I endured it. The clothes they put me in were beautiful but impractical, flowing pants made of some kind of silk that felt like water against my skin, loose shirts that were more decorative than functional, sometimes jewelry that felt heavier than it looked. Then I would be led out of my cage to spend the day at the Empress's feet while she held court. Her throne room was a study in controlled chaos. Aliens of dozens of different species would come and go throughout the day, bringing reports, seeking audiences, delivering tribute. I saw beings that looked like walking trees, others that seemed to be made of living crystal, creatures with too many arms or too many eyes or too many teeth. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, and they all seemed to bow before this green-skinned woman with golden eyes. Sometimes she would ignore me completely, focused entirely on the business of ruling an empire. Other times, she would idly run her fingers through my hair while listening to reports about trade disputes or border skirmishes. Her touch was always impersonal, possessive in the way someone might pet a favorite cat, but there was something about it that made my skin crawl and burn at the same time. It was during these court sessions that I learned the most valuable information. "Your Majesty," said a tall alien with blue skin and too many joints in his arms. Cav grows bolder by the day. "Our spies report that he has been meeting with the outer system governors in secret." The Empress, who had been examining her nails with apparent boredom, looked up with a smile that could have cut glass. "Does he now?" she mused, her fingers still moving through my hair. "And what does dear Cav think these meetings will accomplish?" "He speaks of reform, Majesty, of a more democratic approach to governance." Democracy. She spoke the word like it tasted bad. How quaint, and how utterly foolish. She leaned back in her throne, her hand falling away from my head. "Let him play his little games. Let him think he is clever and that I am blind to his machinations." The blue alien shifted nervously. "Shall we intervene? Arrest him for treason?" Her laugh was like silver bells with razor edges. "Oh no, my dear Admiral, that would spoil all the fun. You see, Cav believes he is building a coalition against me. He thinks if he can gather enough support, he can simply walk into my throne room and demand I step down." She sipped from a goblet filled with some kind of glowing blue liquid. "What he doesn't understand is that I have been watching him since before he learned to walk. Every move he makes, every whisper he thinks is secret, every ally he believes he has won, I know about it all." She set down her goblet and leaned forward, her golden eyes gleaming. "The moment he reaches for my throne, I will crush him. Not quickly, not cleanly, but slowly and thoroughly, so that everyone who might consider following his example will understand exactly what happens to those who challenge me." I kept my expression vacant, my eyes slightly unfocused, but inside I was memorizing every word. Cav, whoever he was planning some kind of coup. The Empress knew about it and was letting it happen, playing with her enemies like a cat with a mouse. Information like this was valuable. If I ever got out of here, there would be people who would pay handsomely to know about political instability in the Zari Empire. But first, I had to survive long enough to escape. As the weeks passed, I began to see cracks in the Empress's perfect facade. It happened mostly at night, when she retreated to her private chambers and thought she was alone with her exotic pet. Her bedroom was as opulent as the rest of her palace, all dark silk and precious metals. The bed was large enough to sleep 6 people comfortably, surrounded by curtains that seemed to move on their own. Bioluminescent patterns covered the ceiling, shifting and changing like a living aurora. She had placed me on a cushioned couch near the foot of her bed, positioned where she could see me, but far enough away that I wouldn't interfere with her sleep. It was there, in the quiet hours when the palace settled into nighttime stillness, that I heard her true voice. The first time it happened, she had dismissed all her servants and attendants, stripping off her elaborate gowns and jewelry to stand naked before a mirror that seemed to be made of liquid silver. Without all the trappings of power, she looked smaller somehow. Still beautiful, still dangerous, but more vulnerable. She had climbed into bed and lain there in the darkness for a long time before she spoke. "They think it is easy," she whispered to the shadows. "They think ruling is some kind of privilege, some reward for being born into the right family." Her voice was soft, almost fragile. "They do not understand that to rule is to be at war every single day, not just with your enemies, but with your allies, your advisors, your own people." She turned onto her side, facing away from me. "Everyone wants something from you. Everyone has an agenda, a scheme, a plan to get rich or powerful, or famous by using you. No one cares about the cost. No one cares what it does to you to make those decisions, to carry that weight." For a moment, just a moment, I saw something flicker behind the golden mask she wore. Exhaustion so deep it seemed to go down to her bones, loneliness that yawned like an abyss, doubt that gnawed at her from the inside. Then she laughed, short and bitter. "But no matter. Cav will fall, the others will bow, and tomorrow I will put on my crown and pretend that it doesn't feel like it weighs 1,000 pounds. She rolled over and went to sleep, but I stayed awake for hours thinking about what I'd heard. The Empress wasn't just a tyrant drunk on power. She was a woman trapped by the weight of an empire, playing a game where the stakes were measured in star systems and the penalty for losing was death. It didn't make me feel sorry for her. She had still captured me, still kept me in a cage like an animal, but it did make her seem more human in a way, more vulnerable, and vulnerability was something I could use. My first act of rebellion was small, so small I almost convinced myself it wasn't rebellion at all. It was evening, and the Empress was reclining on a long couch, idly scrolling through some kind of holographic display that showed reports from across her empire. She had dismissed her court for the day and sent away her servants. The throne room was quiet except for the soft hum of the palace's systems and the distant sounds of the city far below. I was sitting on my cushions near her feet, supposedly decorative and harmless. But I was hungry, and there was a platter of fruit on a low table just within reach. Normally, I would wait for someone to feed me, playing the part of the helpless pet who couldn't even take care of his basic needs. But tonight, I reached for it myself. It was a simple movement, just stretching out my arm to pluck a piece of fruit from the platter. Something any human would do without thinking. But for a pet, for a creature that was supposed to be completely dependent on its owner, it was a statement. Her golden eyes flicked to me immediately. She set aside her display and watched as I bit into the fruit, something that tasted like a cross between a peach and a mango, sweet juice running down my chin. "Interesting," she murmured, her voice thoughtful. "You are adapting." I met her gaze as I chewed, not challenging but not submissive either, just aware. She leaned forward, resting her chin on her palm. "I wonder how much you truly comprehend. Sometimes I look at you and think I see something more than mere animal intelligence." She paused, studying my face. "But that would be impossible, wouldn't it? Humans are clever for primitives, but you lack the cognitive capacity for true understanding." For a moment, I thought she had seen through my act. I thought she had realized that I understood every word she was saying, that I had been listening and learning and planning. My heart hammered against my ribs as I waited for her to call for guards, to have me dragged away to some deeper, darker prison. But then she chuckled and shook her head, as if dismissing her own suspicions. "No matter. You amuse me, little human. That is enough." She stood and stretched, her gown falling around her like liquid shadow. "Come," she said, walking toward her private chambers. "I tire of courtly matters tonight. You will entertain me." I hesitated, not long enough to be obvious, just a fraction of a second. What did she mean by entertain? Was she talking about conversation, games, or something else entirely? She paused at the doorway and looked back at me, one eyebrow raised. For a moment, Her expression was unreadable. Then she smiled, and there was something predatory in it that made my blood run cold. "Do not keep me waiting," she said softly. "I do not like to be kept waiting." I stood and followed her, my bare feet silent on the cold floor. Whatever she had planned for tonight, I would face it the same way I had faced everything else since waking up in that cage. I would survive, I would learn, and someday, when the time was right, I would find my freedom. But for now, I was still her pet. And pets, I was beginning to understand, served their masters in whatever way was demanded of them. Glanced over her shoulder as if sensing my thoughts, a smirk played on her lips. "Relax, pet. I do not break my toys. I fork my muscles to stay loose." My expression neutral. Then without a word I followed her, not because I had no choice but because peace. By peace I was beginning to understand her, and if I understood her I could destroy her. Power was a strange thing. It could be wielded like a blade or worn like a shroud, but in the end it was still just a tool, one that could be turned against its owner. Zyra wielded hers effortlessly. By now I understood that I was no mere pet to her. I was an experiment, a curiosity. A Gamesh had not yet won her attention, was both a privilege and a curse. It made me untouchable to the lesser members of her court, yet it placed me under constant scrutiny. The closer I was to her, the closer I was to danger. For weeks I listened, I played my part, I waited, then Ahmad. My first mistake, the first sign of change was subtle. Zyra had always watched me, but now she observed me differently, not like one watches a name-using creature, but like a predator assessing a rival. The shift came after a war council meeting. I had been kneeling beside her throne, perfectly still, my gaze on Thefler as her generals bickered over Kaver's growing forces. They argued about whether he was a fool or a true threat, whether he should be struck down now or allowed to overreach himself. Zyra had listened unimpressed. Then, after a long silence, she reached out and traced a nail lightly against my jaw. Her generals fell silent. Her touch was featheral, deliberate, a test. "Tell me, little one," she murmured, her voice a slow, indulgent drawl. "Do you think Cav is dangerous?" The room tensed. This was a moment designed to humiliate me, a beast in a cage. Expectato remain obediently ignorant. I met her gaze just for a breath, just enough. Thini let my body relax into her touch, a slow yielding movement, submissive, beaut intentional. She smirked. I had passed the council, resumed their discussion. None wiser, but Zyra's fingers lingered against my skin for a fraction longer than necessary. She suspected something that night. She dismissed her attendant sincerely. She stripped herself of her heavy regalia, the weight of her rule left scattered across the room, jewels abandoned on a low table, the stiff collar of her ceremonial robe underneath the soft glow of the chamber's floating lanterns. She looked less like an untouchable ruler and more like a woman who had carried the weight of an empire for too long. She poured herself a drink, a deep violet liquid swirled in a glass of black crystal. She took a slow sip, then sat down across from me, golden eyes unreadable. "You have been quiet," she said. I remained still, her lips curved slightly. "You were different from the other," a dangerous sentence. I kept my breathing steady. She studied me for a long moment, fingers trailing along the rim of her glass. "Most break so easily." A cage, a collar, a command. She tilted her head, considering, but not you. She was watching, always watching. Then her voice softened, and I realized too late that this was the real test. "What do you dream of, little human?" A simple question, a trap hidden behind silk. A lesser captive might have been caught off guard. They might have stiffened, hesitated, reveled too much. Instead, I let my lips part, let my breath hitch, a flicker of hesitation, a struggle for words that never came. Let her believe I was too simple to answer. Let her believe I was still playing the game. She thought she was winning. For a moment she looked almost disappointed, then she chuckled, shaking her head as if to dismiss the thought. "Thought no matter." She stood stretching languidly, the fabric of her loose robe shifting like heliquid. "Kn. Come," she said, striding toward her chambers. "I tire of courtly matters tonight. You'll entertain me?" I hesitated a fraction of a second, not enough to be noticed. She glanced back, smirking as if she could hear the thoughts racing behind my carefully blank expression. "Relax." Pet, a slow, deliberate pause. "I do not break my toys. I force muscles to stay loose." My expression neutral. Then without a word I followed Edna, because I had no choice, but because I needed to know how much she suspected. The next morning something changed. Azari's servant entered my quarters carrying a set of new robes, black embroidered with silver, not the garb of a prisoner, something finer, something meant to be seen. I stood as he approached. He clicked his man in mild irritation, adjusting the fabric before handing it to me. "Her Majesty requests you wear this." Then softer, almost reluctant, "You are fortunate." I tilted my head, figging ignorance. The servant hesitated, then glancing toward the door as if ensuring no one listened, he muttered, None have lasted this long before. My fingers tightened around the fabric. I had suspected. Now I knew I wasn't just a pet, I was a tea. She was waiting for me to fail. The others had, and when they did, they were gone. I exhaled slowly, keeping my face blank, and took the robes from his hands. Then, as he turned to leave, I made my second mistake. I spoke. Thank you. I said imperfect, Zari. The servant froze. His eyes widened, not in shock, but in fear. For a moment we stood in silence. Then, without another word, he turned sharply and left the door sealed behind him. I was alone, and for the first time since they had arrived, I knew I had overplayed my hand. Zyra would find out, and when shedded, I would no longer be her favorite. I would be something far, far worse. The meant the door sealed shut. I knew I had erred. It was a small thing, a slip of thieving, a single word spoken in a language I was never meant to understand. But in the Empress's court, small things called shatter empires. The servant's reaction had told me everything. His rigid stance, the way his mandibles clicked once in alarm before he hurried from the room, moving too fast for someone simply delivering clothing. I had been terrified, not of me, but of what would happen when she found out. And she would. The weight of my mistake pressed against my skull, but I forced my breathing steady. Panicking wouldn't help me now. I had to move. The first thing it did was change. The black robe fit too well. It wasn't a PR prisoner's garb, it was something meant for court. Its fabric shimmered faintly, embroidered with silver threads that traced patterns resembling constellations. A statement piece, an introduction. She was preparing to show me off. The realization sent a ripple of unease through me. I had expected scrutiny. I had prepared for her tests, her mind games, the slow tightening off the noose around my neck. But if she was making me visible, then something had changed. I had become something else in her eyes, and that could be far more dangerous than simply being her captive. The summons came sooner than I expected. Two guards entered, their weapons holstered, but hands resting lightly against their hilts. They didn't speak, they didn't need to. I followed them through the twisting corridors of the palace, each hallway carved from smooth black stone that pulsed with faint veins of violet light. The energy in the wall shimmered beneath my fingertips as I brushed against them, a power source embedded deep within the structure, breathing like a living thing. No visible defenses, no patrols, yet I knew this place was a fortress, a cage without bars. The throne room doors loomed heated, massive and ornate, their surface etched with ancient symbols. They parted without a sound, revealing the grand chamber beyond, and at its center Zyra lounged, in her throne draped in dark silk, golden eyes unreadable. The weight of the room pressed down on me, heavy with expectation. She was alone, no advisors, no guards, just us. I exhaled slowly. This was not an execution, not yet. I stepped forward and knelt as expected, a deliberate act, a choice. Silence stretched between us. Then she laughed, not cruelly, not sharply, softly, as if I had done something Amos using. She rose with lazy grace, descending the short steps off her throne until she stood before me. I hear you spoke today, she murmured, a statement, not a question. I lifted my head slightly, feigning confusion. Her fingers brushed my chin, tilting my face toward hers. Such a fascinating little deception, she mused, as if speaking to herself. How long have you understood my wonder? I forced my body to remain relaxed beneath her touch, my expression carefully blank. She studied me for a long moment, then sighed. No answer. Of course not. She turned, moving toward the edge of the chamber where a vast window overlooked the sprawling city. Below, the lights of the metropolis stretched into the horizon, flickering like dying stars. Do you know what I find most disappointing about power? She asked, her voice smooth, measured. The isolation. I said nothing. She continued, as if I had no one speaks freely in my presence. They tell me what they think I wish to hear. They kneel, they obey, they fear. She exhaled, fingers tapping idly against the glass. It makes them predictable. She turned back to Mebut, you. A smirk played at her lips. You have been hiding. A beat of silence, then stepped forward, circling me like a predator, assessing whether its prey was worth the chase. You could have revealed yourself the first time you heard my language. She tilted her head. You could have begged for mercy. Her hand brushed over my shoulder, light as silk, but you did not. Another pause. Why? A single word, a command, wrapped in curiosity. I met her gaze, allowing something flicker across me face. Not fear, calculation. Then for the first time I spoke, because I wanted to listen. The words hung between us, sharp as a blade. Her golden eyes darkened with intrigue. A slow knowing smile curled her lips. She did not punish me. She did not call her guards or demand I be thrown back into confinement. Instead, she did something far worse. Shellawed. It was soft at first, then richer, as if I had just handed her the most exquisite puzzle. Oh, I knew you were different, she murmured, stepping closer. But this? She reached out, tracing the collar of my robe, adjusting it as a presenting me, not discarding me. How bold. She turned sharply, moving toward a small table where a bottle of dark amber liquid sat waiting. She poured 2 glasses, then glanced back at me. Come, she said, a casual command. Sit. I hesitated. A trap it had to be, but I played my hand. Refusing would show weakness, so I rose, stepping toward her. She handed me the glass, her fingers brushing against mine for the briefest moment. Then she sat, stretching one leg over the other, watching me like something newly discovered. You intrigue me, she admitted, swirling the drink in her hand. I should have killed you for the deception. I took a slow sip. The drink burned smoky and drick. Yet you haven't, I said. She smirked. Not yet. Silence settled between us. A shift had taken place, fragile but real. I was no longer merely a pet, but I was another equal. Not yet. She tapped her glass thoughtfully, then murmured, perhaps you are wasted as a simple decoration. A pause, then with a slow, indulgent smile, perhaps it is time you became something more. The air between us crackled with something unspoken. I had stepped out off in game and into another, and this time the stakes were far higher. There was a shift in the air that night, subtle, unspoken, but undeniable. The moment I stepped into the grand hall at Zyra's side, I could feel it, the weight of countless gazes pressing against me, not the idle curiosity I had grown accustomed to, nor the faint amusement of nobles who saw me as nothing more than a passing novelty. No, this was different. This was calculation. They were reassessing me. What had changed? Fiends were stood beside me, golden eyes gleaming with a secret only she knew. Zysh had played this game for years, perhaps decades. She understood power not as something blunt, but as a weapon honed to its sharpest edge. And now she had placed me on the board, not as a piece to be discarded, as something far more dangerous. The hall was vast, lined with towering pillars carved from obsidian stone, their surfaces etched with shifting patterns of violet light. Thieling arched high above, suspended with floating lanterns that pulsed like distant stars. The guests, nobles, warlords, politicians moved like predators through the space, their silken robes whispering against the marble floors. It was a court of predators, and tonight I've been invited to the hunt. I was dressed for a two, gone with the simple garments of a captive. In their place I wore deep black robes embroidered with silver threading, a mark of status, a belonging. The fabric clung to me like a second skin, designed not for comfort but for impact. The whispers began the moment I entered. Who is he? Why is he standing beside her? Is this a new game? A new weapon? Zyra, let them talk. Let them wonder. Then, with deliberate grace, she turned to me and handed me a glass of deep amber liquid. A silent command, a test. I accepted. With hesitation, she smirked approval. The room watched, waiting for the next move. She made it for them. Enjoy yourself, pet, she murmured, just loud enough for those nearest to hear. Learn something. Then she turned away, leaving me alone, or rather unleashing me. They came to me in waves, some out of curiosity, some out of arrogance, some because they wanted to see what made me so special. A silver-skinned noble approached first, his expression carefully measured. He swirled the wine in his glass, studying me as if I were an exotic creature displayed for his amusement. You must be quite the entertainment, he amused, for her to keep you this long. I smiled slightly. You must be quite the disappointment to be speaking to me instead of her. His grip on his glass tightened just enough to crack the surface. He left without another word. Others followed, some more subtle, some more direct, but they all circled the same unspoken question. Why are you still alive? Why is she not broken you? Why has she not discarded you? The answer, I suspected, was something given Zyra herself had not fully decided, and that made me dangerous. Zyra's presence dominated the room, but I had learned to watch her between the moments, the way her fingers tapped idly against the stem of her glass when a particular noble spoke, the slight narrowing of her golden eyes when a general hesitated for answering her, and most importantly, the moment her gaze flickered. It was brief, a fraction of a second, but I caught it. Her attention had shifted just slightly toward a dark cloaked figure at the far end of the room. He was speaking to another noble, his voice low, his movements careful, too careful. Then a passing of hands, a whisper, a glance, a nod. A deal, a conspiracy, and Zyra had not seen it, but I turned, making my way back toward her, keeping my movements on her. Hurried. When I reached her side, she glanced at me, raising a single brow. I leaned in slightly, my voice low. The man in the red cloak. He just received something from your general. For the first time that night, Zyra stilled. It was brief, a fraction of hesitation, Thesmalus tell. Then smoothly, she smiled. I see. She turned her gaze toward the man in question. Not directly, not noticeably, but I saw the way her fingers tightened against her glass. She had not expected this, which meant one thing: there was a traitor in her court, and now she knew it. A slow, deliberate smirk curled her lips while she murmured, setting her glass aside, "I suppose the night is not over after all." Then she turned to me, golden eyes sharp. "You have just become very useful, little human." And I understood I was no longer playing the game. I had just become a piece on the board. When the gathering ended, Zayas summoned me to her private chambers. She was silent at first, pouring herself a drink, the sound of liquid filling the glass the only noise between us. Then she turned, studying me with a gaze I could not quite read. "You saw something I did not," she said. Finally, I inclined my head. "Yes." A pause. Then she smirked. "And yet you told me." I met her gaze. "Would you have preferred I didn't?" Although thoughtful ham. She took a slow sip, then stepped closer, close enough that the warmth of her presence curled around me like silk. "You are not afraid of me?" she observed. It wasn't a question. "No," I said simply. Another pause, then softly, "Good." She set her glass down and turned away, as if arriving at some unseen decision. "You are no longer a pet," she said. The words settled over the room like the final stroke of a blade. I waited. She glanced over her shoulder, smirking. "Now let you see what you can truly do." And just like that, the game changed again. Power was a game, and I had been playing it long before I knew the rules. The night I pointed out the traitor, everything changed. Zaira had seen me as an amusement, then a curiosity, then an asset, but now no, I was a threat, not to her throne, not yet, but to the way things had always been. She had placed me on the board, but she had expected me to start moving the pieces. The betrayal was unfolding faster than Zaira had anticipated. By the time her spies confirmed the traitor's identity, General Saris, one of Herlinge's serving commanders, it was already too late to contain it. Caver had made his move. The palace had gone silent, the kind of quiet that signaled something worse than war. The staff avoided eye contact. The guards stiffened at every shadow. The court was waiting to see which way the blade would fall. So as I had no intention of dying in this palace, no matter how fine the silks or gilded the cage. But escape wasn't an option. Not yet. I had spent too long listening, learning, waiting. And now the Empress herself was about to be backed into a corner. And that meant she needed me. The attack came at dusk. It wasn't an outright assault. Cav was too clever for that. His men were already inside, scattered among the palace ranks, waiting for the signal. It came in the form of a single explosion, a small detonation, just enough to shake the throne room. Panic. A moment of hesitation. That was all it took. Guards turned on each other. Couriers fled. And in the center of it all, Zaira remained perfectly still. She didn't run. She didn't bark orders. She simply watched. A queen assessing the battlefield before making her move. Then her golden gaze flicked to me. "Stay close," she said. Not a command, a warning. And then the doors burst open. Cav entered like he had already won, draped in ceremonial armor, flanked by his most loyal warriors. He moved with the arrogance of a man who believed himself victorious. His gaze swept over the carnage, landing on Zaira with something almost like amusement. "Majesty," he drew. "You should have stepped aside when you had the chance." Zaira smirked. "And let you Rulik have chuckled. You are outnumbered. Your generals have abandoned you. Even now your forces hesitate. They know this is over." Silence. Then Zaira exhaled slowly, like a woman forced to entertain a particularly dull conversation. "I tire of this," she murmured, and then she moved. One moment, she was still. The next she was upon them, blades igniting in her hands, twin arcs of violet energy cutting through the air. The first soldier barely had time to raise his weapon before she severed his arm at the elbow. The second died before he could scream. Chaos erupted. Caver's men surged forward, but Zaira was faster. She wove through them like a force of nature, her movements efforts practiced. This was not a ruler sitting comfortably on a throne. This was a warrior who had taken her empire by blood and fire. But even she couldn't fight them all. More soldiers flooded the chamber, pushing her back. Even she was not invincible. And then I saw it. The moment Cav reached for his sweepin, a pulse gun, a coward's weapon. He was going to shoot her in the back. I didn't think. I moved. My body reacted before my mind caught up. Before I could weigh the consequences, I lunged forward, grabbing the nearest fallen soldier's blade, and threw it with everything I had. The blade struck true. Caver cried out, clutching his arm. The pulse gun tumbling from his grip. Zaira turned. So what I had done, and in that moment, I saw her make a choice. Not to leave me behind, not to use me as a distraction, but to trust me, stay with me. She had And this time I believed her. The battle didn't last much longer. With Cav wounded and Zyra still standing, the tide turned swiftly. The guards who had hesitated now saw where power truly lay and they made their choice. Loyalists fell upon the rebels, cutting them down without mercy. Svir was dragged before the throne, bleeding, furious. Zyra stood over him, golden eyes unreadably. You always were ambitious, she mused. Kaver spat blood. This isn't over. Zaya smiled. Oh, it is. Then without ceremony, she drove her blade through his heart. Throne room was silent. The bodies had been cleared, the blood scrubbed from the marble. The court had returned, carefully composed, as if nothing had happened. Zaya sat upon her throne, one leg crossed over the other, watching me. I stood before her, no longer dressed as a pet, no longer kneeling. We both knew what came next. You saved my life, she said finally. I shrugged. You needed the help. She smirked, so modest. A pause, then softer. And now, what little human? I met her gaze. She had power. She had her throne. And me? I could leave. I play my part. I had survived. But something in her expression told me she wasn't expecting that. She was waiting it to command, not to demand, but to offer. The choice for the first time was mine. I exhaled, slow and steady. Then I smiled. I think I'd like to see what happens next. Zyra's golden eyes gleamed. Good, she murmured. So would I. And just like that, the game began. A new 2 weeks had passed since Kaver's death. Their rebellion had died with him. His allies, those who hadn't fled or begged for mercy, were executed swiftly. The Zari did not believe in dragging out punishment. Betrayal demanded blood, and Zyra had spilled it without hesitation. The Empire was hers again, firmly and unquestionably. And yet the palace still whispered, note about Cav, not about his failed coup, about me. They had seen me rise from nothing, from a cage pet, to something standing at the Empress's side. Some called it manipulation, others feared it was something worse. Control, influence, love. None of them knew the truth. Bako say, didn't know the truth, not yet. I was no longer kept in a gilded cage. I had been given chambers of my own, expansive, luxurious, yet strangely impersonal. A place of power, but not of belonging. I was allowed to move freely now, and yet a very step felt like a decision I had not yet made. Then one evening Zaya summoned me. The throne room was empty when I arrived. The sirs had been dismissed, the guards absent. Only Charmaine standing by the vast window that overlooked her city. The skyline stretched endlessly before her, and empire lights and towering spires, a kingdom carved from war and ambition. She didn't turn as I approached. I should reward you, she said, for saving my life. I leaned against one of the pillars. You already did. You let me live. She smirked. Is that all you want? I said nothing. Zyra finally turned to face me. She was not dressed in royal regalia tonight. No crown, no heavy jewels. Just a simple, elegant robe, black with silver embroidery. Her long, dark hair flowing freely down her back. She looked less like an untouchable ruler and more like a woman who had spent too long fighting for her place in the world, and she was watching me with something unreadable in her golden eyes. You could leave, she said. The words hung between swift and sharp at once. I know, I admitted. You have no debts here, no chains. If you wish, I will grant you a ship, credits, safe passage beyond my borders. A Pausathan, more carefully. Do you wish to leave? I studied her, searching for something in her expression, some flicker of expectation, some sign that she already knew my answer. And for the first time, I saw uncertainty. Zyra was never uncertain. She commanded, dictated, ruled. But now she was giving me a choice, a real choice. And for a long moment, I didn't know what to do with it. I used to think a bootscape every day, I admitted. Back when I was your pet. She didn't flinch at Theward. I took a slow breath, looking past her toward the vast city below. But Thene started paying attention to your enemies, your court, you. I turned back to her and I realized something. She arched a brow. Oh, I stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint glow of the city lights reflected in her eyes. You were never my captor, I said. Not really, her smirk faltered. If you wanted me broken, I would be, I continued. If you ended me dead, I'd be in the ground. But you didn't break me, and you didn't kill me. A pause. Because you never wanted Tosalence stretched between us. Then finally she exhaled. shaking her head. "You are far too clever for your own good," I smirked. "That's why you like me," she cackled. But there was something softer behind it then. She reached out, not in command, not in dominance, but as an offering. Her fingers brushed against mine, light, uncertain. The most powerful woman in the empire, and yet in this moment, she was waiting for me, waiting for my choice. I could leave. She would let me go. No tricks, no punishment. I could take my freedom, leave this world behind and never look back. Or I could stay, not as a prisoner, not as a pet, but as something more. I looked at her, this woman who had once been my captor, then my adversary, then something I had no words for. And in her gaze I saw something I had never expected, a future. My fingers curled around hers. Her breath hitched just slightly. Then slowly she smiled, a real smile. And just like that, game was over, and something new had begun. They still whispered about me in the court. The human who had been a pet human who had saved the Empress. The human who now stood beside her, no longer kneeling, no longer caged. But the whispers didn't matter. Zaire ruled her empire, as she always had, with fire, with steel, with unshakable will. And I ruled nothing, commanded no armies, held no titles. But I stood at her side as Herkwall. And in the end that was more than enough.